welcome to the show, buddy.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it, Chris.
Yeah, I always like to start, if you heard some of my episodes, like every episode starts with this and never ends the same. And that is just kind of give the audience, the wicked smart listeners, behind the green curtain, kind of when, why, and how you get started in this lovely game here.
Yeah, sure. So my background is probably very similar to some of the listeners here. I came from a career that was abruptly changed without my wanting or desired. I came from the airline pilot industry. So I was and still am a international airline pilot. And my change or course of action was 9/11, which I think you and I are both old enough to remember that time frame.
You bet.
And up until that point, I was flying for a major airline all over the world. And I realized that in my mind, I had the safest, most secure job that one could ever have. 9/11 hit, and 48 hours later, I was given a furlough notice that basically said, thanks for playing, but we don't think we need you. And that safe, secure job that you thought you had, it's not that safe. It's really not that secure. So good luck.
Yeah.
And that was the moment that I realized that everything that I had thought up until that point in my life was really an illusion. And so I had to reinvent myself. I had to re-understand what my skill sets were, what I was good at, what I was bad at. And I had to basically redeploy myself into another industry. Mine was just to survive. Mine wasn't a, hey, this would be kind of cool to have extra income. This was a, what will I do to actually put food on the table?
Yeah.
So it was a very shocking obviously 9/11, we all know was catastrophic to begin with for everyone.
Yeah.
And then to lose your career was even more catastrophic for me because I had nothing to do with it, but I was a byproduct of it. But it made me realize how unsafe and unsecure a quote unquote 9-to-5 job actually is. And so that's what got me into real estate. I started learning, probably like many people, took my licks, got my lessons, and kind of progressed there for the last 20 years.
And when you started, Steve, right out of that, because you had to generate quickly, what's your first few deals look like? And did you have some guidance? Like, just talk about that start a little bit, because two things to give this context. I know there's people in the audience that got hit by COVID in one shape, form, or another, or I'm hearing conversations about, well, I didn't, but I know it could happen type thing, right?
Sure.
So just address how you started. I know that'll touch a lot of people.
Yeah. So for me, the way I started was, I am a doer. I don't know anything else except doing. So I jumped in head first. I bought every book I could read. This is back before YouTube, so I'd go to the library. Yep. But I read a book a week on real estate and on wealth. And I started taking classes. I got mentored. I got coached. The first transactions I did were wholesaling because I didn't really have any money. I didn't know anything about real estate. And I thought, okay, this is a good way to generate cash. And that Chicken Little in me was still threading, of not actually getting in and making that commitment. So I did that for several years. I got very, very vertical and very good at negotiating. Took a lot of classes on negotiating, NLP, and I realized that the wealthiest people on the planet are actually communicators. And if you can learn how to communicate, you can do anything. So I took that and I flourished in that world. I made enough money that I actually bought an apartment complex about 3 years later in a partnership. And that got me into the buy and hold world. So to answer your question, the first couple deals, they were all wholesale properties.
Cash.
But I learned cash. But again, as we all know, that's a job. Yeah. And I was back flying again. So I was doing it as a career. During that whole time since 9/11, I've been working as a pilot. So I buy and hold. From that time, I built a property management company. We built it from zero up to 1,000 properties. And then we sold that company to a venture capital backed company. So I learned how to scale and actually exit a company. Awesome. All while I was a pilot. So I've been doing a lot and kind of my life has progressed since there. But that was my first entrance into real estate, was wholesaling, to answer your question.
So I have kind of my thoughts on this, but I want to get your answer to this question. So the wicked smart listeners, someone's out there in the corporate world right now. Yep. And they didn't get nailed, but they know that this could be inevitable, or they're just tired of it. Like one of our key guys just said, enough flying, I'm gone. He left on his own. So what's your one nugget for them right now, as you look back in hindsight with your life? Cause you probably would, from what you just said, love the fact you left and you're doing real estate. What would you say to them? Like they've been procrastinating doing it. What would you say to them?
That's a great question. And let me just to all disclosure, I still do fly. So I fly a 787 for a major airline. So I have the best life in the world, in my opinion. I travel the world 2-3 times a month and I don't need it. So I don't need the job. And so I would say the one thing you have to do is you have to identify what is that lifestyle you want. And what I mean by that is there's so many people in the corporate world, and I fly with a lot of pilots, obviously, and everybody is running away from what they don't want in life. I talk to people, they don't want to be controlled. They don't want the corporate lifestyle. They don't want the grind. And I coach people and I mentor them. And my question is you telling me what you don't want, but if you focus on what you don't want, that's exactly where you're going to go. So why don't you tell me what you want in life? And there's so many people, I'm sure, as you know, they don't know. They're so busy being miserable and upset at what they don't want. They've never actually figured where they're running to. So to answer your question, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to identify what is it that you actually want? Because, 4 walls in a roof or 100 4 walls and roofs or a comma or a decimal point in a bank account, that doesn't give you happiness. There's no glass ceiling that all of a sudden you're going to say, I've got 5 million in the bank or 20 million or whatever that is. And now I'm happy. So a lot of times that's what we think. We think we're going to get to this precipice and we're going to pop through the other side and all of a sudden we're going to be happy. But I have learned, and this is, I've been coached since day one, I've been mentored and coached. And the one thing I learned is you actually have to become a different person mentally. The person you are the person I was when I started my journey 20 years ago, I'm a much different person today than I was, right? Everyone's going to be different. I have transcended through many different, types of people to get to where I am, to think how I think. So I think a lot of times as entrepreneurs, just to answer your question, a lot of times we think we should be doing something. And we think if I work hard, I will get it. But we all know people work hard their whole lives and they're not successful. Right. And 95% of investors fail the first 5 years. It's not the working hard or the doing. It's the be. You have to become that person. So a lot of times we have to spend more time focusing on who we want to be mentally before we actually start doing to be that, to do the stuff that a successful person does.
And you do a lot in that space right now, right? This is maybe a good transition with the mindset piece. So can you talk a little bit? We'll put everything in the show notes for these guys for links, but talk a little bit about your programs and what that looks like. Cause I went in and explored and it's quite amazing.
Yeah. So, and thank you. I appreciate that. After I sold my business, the company that bought my company is about 10,000 properties and I was their VP of investor education. And during that time frame, I really thought to myself, okay, what do I want to do with the second half of my life? I've got all this knowledge. My opinion is our lives are like books. We have chapters. Chapters begin and chapters end. And so the next chapter for me was to take all this knowledge and education and everything that I've known in building a business, doing real estate, and trying to transfer that to other people. Because if we don't do that, we're being selfish. And I think entrepreneurs can be very selfish people in the sense that we learn all this knowledge, but we don't share it with people. So I started trying to do everything I could to educate people. So I created a mastermind. I went and created a top level online education academy. And what that does is it shows people, how do you go from 0 to 1, right? I mean, look, we know people that are mega superstars and they're doing syndications and 50 plus million. I know these people, but that's not the average person. The average person is somebody just like your audience that says, you know what, how do I get 1? Yep. And how do I know that 1 is actually the right one for me? What parameters do I have? I'm driving down the street. I see a house on one side. I see a house on the other. Which one is the best one? So I teach you how to identify which one is the best one based on your goals, based on your strategies, and based on the tactic. So I break that down 0 to 1. Then I go 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 plus syndications, all financial, creative financing, how to find motivated sellers. I mean, it's a full-blown, in-depth course to get someone that knows nothing about real estate to becoming a basic expert if they follow my steps. Minus the mistakes of the last 20 years that I've done, of course.
I think it's huge. You probably saw this because you're on the show now, but I mean, I've said in the last, I don't know, years worth of shows that I look to chat with people just like you and I that have been at it for a while, because the opposite of that can be dangerous. I think you would agree with that.
Absolutely. It reminds me of I think you're old enough like me to remember the .com bust. And I remember being in New York City and I remember the waiters giving me stock advice. And I thought, that's weird. Like, how does this guy know that much? And then that was just before the crash. And that that was an inclination. And so when I start talking to people and they tell me, yeah, I've been doing this for a while. I've been doing this since 2018. It's not like the 2017. I'm thinking 2017. Man, I've been doing this since '01. And I don't think I'm an expert. I learned just like everyone else. I'm very humble. If someone's knowledgeable, I will sit there and listen. I still am mentored and coached. And I talk to some of these people and I think, real estate is a cycle, right? We all know there's fall, there's winter, there's spring and summer, right? Just like any kind of season. We're in a certain season right now. And for people that haven't seen what real estate can do on the backside, which you and I know, it doesn't discriminate. It takes no prisoners, and it is like a wrecking ball when it comes back the other way. And the people that have their businesses set up incorrectly or immaturely they will get wiped clean. People like you will wait. We're educated. We're knowledgeable. We'll sit there and go pick up the pieces and get the benefits. I mean, I know after the 2008 crash, there were more multimillionaires created after the crash because they were sitting there and educating themselves on what they wanted. So with it, when the crash happened, they went in. Now, I'm not saying there's going to be a crash, but I think there will be a correction. And people like you and I know what we're looking for. And the people that were kind of living on a dream, they will get corrected, we'll say.
Yeah, I think that one of the hosts called, I didn't say this, so they can't get mad at me for poo-pooing on them, but one of the hosts called it new money. Since the '08, then you get these people out there teaching right now. It's just a scary thought. So don't do that.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So how important I want to ask you about some student flow, like what you see, but first I want to ask you this, how important is the mindset piece? Like you seem very dialed into that. How important is that in the crux of the matter? Because I know you and I could teach skill set to a blue in the face, but they all get different results. There's gotta be a reason, right?
Yeah. What I have learned is success is a recipe. It's like baking a cake, right? You don't put the frosting on first and then put it in the oven, right? So mindset is the integral part, in my opinion, of that. Because look, if somebody says, I want 25 properties, I can go and get them 25 properties the next day. And they're going to go, man, this isn't what I wanted. So I think it's so important. It's like laying the foundation before you build a house. If you just start building on dirt, it's going to crumble. That's the challenge that investors have, is they think they need to hurry up because they're missing. The way I equate it is if you wanted to go to Disneyland, that's your destination. So when I work with people, the first thing we have to understand is, what is your Disneyland? Like, why are you doing this? And if you can't identify what that is, and if it's not tangible, it doesn't have a time limit on it, and we cannot quantify it, then we need to work on that first. Because look, there's many people that are very, very wealthy and they are miserable. So you don't want to be that person. And sometimes, we have this idea that money is going to solve problems. That is the furthest thing from the truth. That does not solve anything. And I ask people, we do this because we want a certain lifestyle. We want the freedom. We don't want to worry about having costs. Having money, you just spend more money, right? If you're not, and again, I go back to changing who you are, because I think it all starts in the mind, right? I mean, to me, it is the vital piece that everyone misses. And I see people out there, and you need to do this, you need to do that. I have a son, 14 years old. He bought his first rental property.
Love it.
And I get a lot of people, they ask me, they're like, well, how did he get a loan? How did he get comps? How did he do this? Everyone's asking me how questions. And I tell them, you're asking me the wrong question. What you should be asking me is why. Why did a 14-year-old kid say, Dad, I want to own real estate and I want passive income? Why is he thinking that way? Because I could have given him a property,
right?
But he could have run it into the ground just like anyone could. But when you train them in that why mindset, that to me is the thing that will keep you, motivation is a battery. It drains over time. Your why is what keeps you going. As you know, cash calls, maintenance issues, problems, all the dark and dirty days that no one seems to act like ever happens. That's when your why carries you through. And that's the mindset side.
No, I love it. There was a cool book, and I'm sure you ran across it, by Carol Dweck, Dr. Carol Dweck, about the fixed mindset versus the open mind. It's just when my students hit those roadblocks, I say, welcome it. That's cool stuff, as long as you get the why in place. I love it. I love it.
Absolutely.
Our stories have a lot of parallels, so that would take a few more shows. But so my son did his first around 15. He was a junior in high school, very similar. So I hope the Wicked Smart listeners are picking up on a lot of these ties, a lot of the experience, all the corporate stuff, and a lot of the family stuff. It's really cool. So congrats on that. I love it.
Thank you.
Steve, when you're coaching people, I love to get this from almost every guest. When you're coaching people, is there something that when you go home at night, like my wife will ask me this question all the time, that if I asked you this question each night and said, if they would only do blank, they would have huge success. And I know it's hard, one little blank, it could be a word or two, but do you see a repeat thing with your students, whether they're newer experience where you go, man, if they would just do this, I can see it so clearly. Is there such a thing? And is it the mindset? I don't know.
To me, it is, it's the imposter syndrome. And I think that I would say the imposter syndrome where they say, even if they're trying to get private money, or they have a belief of stuff that we are taught as kids. And that, I tell them, I go, nobody knows anything about you until you open your mouth and confirm what you're thinking. So if you think you're an imposter, everyone's going to agree once you start talking like an imposter. Oh, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm new in this. I'm like, you are sabotaging yourself. And so the biggest challenge is basically shutting up, really. I mean, and believing that you can do something. And I think that starts with I do I am statements, reticular activating system. It all starts with your brain of your rituals and your habits of who you are every day. So the biggest challenge is when people tell me I tried, I can't, but this, but that, I'm like, take those 3 words out of your vocabulary. You are self-defeating. And you think you're joking, but you're not. You are actually you are the problem for your situation. And so a lot of people think like, oh, this happened to me. It didn't happen to you. It happened because of you. Just like, and look, I take full accountability when 9/11 happened and I got my furlough notice. The only person I blamed was myself because I allowed myself to get lazy and I allowed myself to get lulled into the fact that I had a corporate job with a major commercial airline and I was going to be safe forever. That was on me. And I could blame 9/11. I could blame anything. But the reality is I got lazy. And I remember telling myself, I will never, ever let that happen to me. So I think the imposter syndrome is the first thing. The next thing is them taking action on a consistent basis. This isn't a sprint. This is a 20-year marathon. And a lot of people ask me, we were talking corporate America and, we have COVID going on and obviously airlines are hit really bad. So now 20 years later, people are getting furloughed in the airlines. Some airlines are going to be shutting down soon. I get a lot of people that come up to me and they say, Steve, what's the difference between you in 9/11 and you today, right? I didn't grow another arm. I didn't do anything different. I still weigh about the same, maybe less hair, but other than that, about the same. And I tell people, I took massive action on a daily basis. And I said yes when I was scared, when I was nervous, and when I thought, I don't think this is the right thing. I followed what I was told to do. And I kept saying yes. And I think to myself, if I wouldn't have said yes to being coached, being mentored, to thinking outside of the box, I would be the same employee right now, nervous that the airline's going to shut down, not knowing what my next move is going to be because I said no. So saying no, you know what you have. What you have is what you have. When you say yes, that opens up a whole bunch of opportunities. So I tell people the biggest challenge is the imposter syndrome stops them from saying yes.
It's awesome. There was some in that 3 minutes or 4, whatever it was, there's some serious nuggets for the wicked smart listeners. And I'm always saying, look, do something after the show. Like, there's good stuff here, but do something, because if information, I guess said this recently to me, said if information was the answer, then all the librarians would be billionaires, right? That's not the case. So they got to do something with it.
Absolutely.
Steve, you mentioned I am statements. So now this is just a curious personal question. I do those. Do you read them? Do you rewrite them? Do you listen to them by audio? Do you do all, like, what do you do with your statements?
I write them every single morning. So I have a sheet of paper, and on one side, it's my morning goal sheet. I've used the other ones. They just didn't work for me. So I created my own. I put it on my website. I sell it for $2 or something. But to me, and I'll tell you exactly what it is. On one side, it is, I talk about what are my 3 goals, my 3 90-day goals. So I have wealth, health, and relationship. So what is my wealth goals for 90 days? And then what is one action item I'm going to do today to get me closer to that goal, whatever it is. Same with health, same with relationship. So family, that kind of thing, right? So I think to be extremely wealthy, it's a 3-legged stool. It's not just money, right? Because again, we know people that are single and miserable and vice versa. So it's a 3 thing. After that, I have 20 I am statements and I write them down and they change. And the reason a lot of them change is because I accomplish them. I said that I would be speaking around the world. I've done 3 tours speaking throughout Australia and the United States. Check that one off. Yep. I'd be a published author. I wrote a book. Check it out. So I do them every single day, just like I'm sure you do. And then I flip the page. And on the other side of the page, I talk about, okay, what are my must-dos today? What are 5 must-dos that I have to accomplish? And then what are other things that I need to do, but it's not mandatory. And I carry it around with me. It's right here. I carry it around with me and I check them off as I go. So it's right in front of my face all the time. So that's how I do mine.
No, I love it. The reason I wanted you to say that, and there's no surprise that you have an intense routine, right? So as soon as you said the I am statements, I want everybody to hear that. And for a bunch of reasons, one being very simplistic, and that is people hear you, people hear anyone, myself, anyone on the show, and say either they're lucky or that's really cool they have that. But there's a lot of shit that goes on behind the scenes that's necessary that you're hitting just a fraction of it. So I just wanted them to hear how disciplined.
Well, it's funny. So I'll give you an example. In the airline industry, whenever there's an accident or a crash, they take that crash, they break it apart, and they identify what the crash was. So in a crash, there is a certain amount of things that cause a crash. Obviously, I mean, them hitting the ground is the crash, but there's missteps that happen along the way. And on average, there are 7 mistakes that happen that will cause an aircraft accident or incident statistically. Wow. So my question to people is, if there's 7 things that cause a mistake, could it be that there's 7 things that cause success? I don't know the answer, but we know it's not one thing. You and I don't have this magic high five or this shaking or this dance we do before we wake up. It's the combination of all the things that we've done, the rituals and habits that we've had over the years that they change. But every morning I get up, and I've done it for the last 5 years. And why do I do it? Because I read books and other successful people said, hey, do I am statements. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do them. That's literally, do they work? I don't know. I can't pinpoint that that's what did it, but I think it's a combination, just like a combination that ends in a crash, and there's combination of things that end in success. And I think when you meet other successful people like yourself, myself, other people, we all have rituals and habits that are very, very similar.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, let me ask you, do you think after 9/11, a lot of that changed, or do you see yourself over the last literally 20 years kind of stacking, as I call it, things on top of each other, not 7, but maybe 9 or 11 or 12? What do you think about that?
I think that they change and evolve, in my opinion, as you grow as a person. You're either growing or shrinking. I mean, right. You never stay the same. And so here's my opinion. It is every day that we wake up, we have a decision to make. We're at a decision point every morning. Am I going to be better than yesterday, or am I going to be worse? We're never the same. So doing nothing is making a decision. You're saying you're going to be worse than yesterday. I make a conscious decision to say, I'm going to be better. Now, the person I was, October 1, 2001 is a much different person than I am today because of different rituals and habits. So it's kind of like a white belt going to a black belt, right? You do different things. You have the basic things that you do, but I may have different conversations with different people, people that maybe I'm flying in their corporate jet. We're having a business meeting. I learned how to sell my business. I learned about venture capital. I couldn't have done that October 1, 2001 because I wasn't prepared. I didn't do the right rituals to get me to that point. So I think that they change and evolve. And I think that as I grow, those things, things that used to scare me, that I was so nervous about, I don't even think twice about it. I go, man, I can't believe that actually made me nervous. So I do think that they evolve. And I think as you evolve, they evolve as well.
Love it. Love it. I appreciate the candor. I appreciate the discipline. As I wrap up, I have a different question at the end all the time, Steve. But you've got an American flag behind you, like immediately behind you. And for those of you that aren't seeing this video, you listen to this, jump over to YouTube. You want to catch Steve's energy because it's infectious. Significance of the flag to you personally, because I see it right behind you as we're doing this show.
Well, that's a great question. I've never been asked that. I'm a very proud person of where I live. Grew up in Los Angeles back in the 90s and live in Texas now. But I get to travel the world as an airline pilot. I fly 787. I've been to every continent except Antarctica. And I will say, and this, again, just my personal opinion for whatever it's worth, we live in an amazing place. We really do. And when you see other countries and you get to go back into the back areas of these other countries and you see how much people wish they could live where we live and have what we have, we always joke first world problems, but that's actually true. When just getting water that isn't contaminated, that you're going to drink, is a win for the day. And we're upset because our Wi-Fi is not working in a certain part of a town. You really got to think of it. So to me, when I get to travel the world and I get to see different countries, different languages, different, the way people interact and work. It's to me, it just makes me very proud to be able to do that. And I've done a lot of stuff where we've flown troops, and you just see how these young men and women are putting their lives on the line, and they don't know me, they don't know anybody, and they're just full-fledged committed to the dream of this. So to me, it just means a lot, and it's just pride in who we are, in my opinion.
No, I love it. I did some crazy things people have behind their head on the interview, and I just wanted to ask you about that. Yeah. Okay, so reminder for Wicked Smart listeners, smartrealestatecoach.com/millionaire mindset. You can jump into Steve's online program. As a Wicked Smart listener, I don't bring on guests without experience, and I don't bring on programs that I don't think you can glean loads from, and you absolutely can from not just this interview, but Steven's course. So jump in there. Steve, it was a pleasure, buddy. I look forward to hanging out with you more. And could you also tell them about, you have your own show too, do you not?
I don't have a show. I used to do stuff with Bigger Pockets. I don't do that show anymore, but now I do. I've got masterminds. And I mean, if you look me up online, YouTube or Instagram, you'll see.
So they'll get you.
I put out a lot of stuff. Yeah, they'll find me.
Awesome. Steve Rozenberg, pleasure, buddy. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it, buddy.